In Chicago, we had 120 participants from all over the world. Our second conference, you'll see it in a moment, will be in Sydney, Australia in November. And the report I got last week was that we have more than 175 participants that paid the registration already. And there's still time to go till November, so you could still join us if you want. I'm told Sydney is a very nice place. I've never been there. ISKI publishes a newsletter. We publish a peer-reviewed journal, and again, the journal it's only in its second year, and in 2009 I can tell you that last week I received the 36 submission, and we have placed for 20, or now we could go maybe for 24. And that's only the second year of the journal, and the most satisfying fact for me is the fact that in the last half year I'm getting papers from people I never heard of. And I really thought of myself as somebody who knows most of the people in the field of child indicators. I'm getting people from countries and from people that I've never heard of, and great papers, really good ones. And the journal is really flourishing with a Q and even, God forbid, a rejection rate that is crossing 30% now. So I talked about the journal. We are planning to stay with 4 issues per year, not more than that. But we are probably going to have a bigger page budget and move from 5 papers per issue to 6 or 7, so we could accommodate the demand. The second thing that I'm very excited about is that in November we are launching the first book in a new book series, and all of those initiatives, both the journal and the book, were not initiated by me or by ISKI. As funny as it might seem to us, Springer approached us and said, "Let's do it." And they didn't do it because we are nice or they're altruistic, because they realize this is a really growing field and they've done their market research or whatever, that it's a growing field and there will be demand. The first book is titled From Child Welfare to Children's Well-Being. It's a book in honor of Al Kahn, which anybody who studies comparative child welfare probably know the name Kahn and Kammerman. It always goes together. Al Kahn died a couple of months ago when he was 90 years old. And it's a tribute to him with lots of chapters from all over the world, with a Canadian co-editor from the other side, from Halifax, Nova Scotia. And there is another book in publication, and we have an unlimited budget. So if anybody wants to publish a book on children's well-being, the book series title is broader. It's Children's Well-Being, Research and Indicators. So it doesn't have to be only indicators. And if anybody wants to publish, is more than welcome. That's the conference in Australia, that if anybody wants to come is more than welcome to join. Our next conference will probably be in the UK, probably in York. There is a competition between 3 cities, but probably Jonathan Bradshaw is going to host it in York in July or September, and then we'll come back to North America. And that's it. Thank you very much. I'm on time, right?
Thank you, Asher. That was very good. That was great. We are going to take some questions. Perhaps we could just take a couple of burning questions, and then we're going to have Martin and Michael come up and tell you a little bit about the BC effort, and any questions that you have, or any testimonies that you have about things that you are doing. I know we have a really amazing audience here of people, both from the university and from the government, who are doing this kind of work. So we could consider it an expanded roundtable too, and we also would be really interested to hear, for example, what the Ministry of Children and Health are doing. I know there's some great initiatives going on out there. So, and if you don't have to feel like you just have to ask a question when we get to the roundtable part, it would be great if you could tell us a little bit about what you're doing. Kelly and interviews and stuff too. So we can think of this as an information session, but maybe we could just take a couple of questions, since we do have basically another 40 minutes to do this. Any follow-up questions?
Thank you so much for that presentation. So you gave us
you have to yell because no one will hear you.
Okay, so I said to Asher, so thank you so much for the information. You gave us a strong historical background about what's going on with child well-being. So my question is on the composite index of child well-being. So can you mention like any interesting empirical work that have done with the composite index of child well-being?
Probably the most empirical, interesting, and the most thorough work was done by Ken Land from Duke University in the Child Wellbeing Index for the Foundation for Child Development in the United States. Ken is one of those demographer, statistician wizard that gets the kick of playing with weights and numbers and whatever. I don't like the indicators he used, because he used whatever existed 25 years backwards, even not only what exists today. He was commissioned to do it 25 years backward and forward. But he's done a very thorough work and published a number of papers out of it. And the second most, or not the second, but just as comprehensive work is really the set of indices that Jonathan Bradshaw has published on the EU, OECD, and other countries. Jonathan has went more on a theoretical way, trying first of all to build a framework or a concept and then put the data into it. But then when it came to data, especially since he was doing international comparison, then the data is even more rare to achieve. The biggest issue in indices is the issues of weights. So you decided on domains. But let's see, anybody here dares to decide what is more important, education or health. Now the solution most people found, and I found it also when I've done a small index to the welfare minister in Israel, is to give equal weights to the domains you are using. Ken Land argues in one of his papers that statistically, empirically, it's the best way to do it anyway. And believe me, he started with all those equations. I lost him in the middle of the way, but I trust him. But that's probably the major issue, the weights of the different indicators, and again, the availability of data. At the end of the story, and I probably didn't stress it enough, so I'll do it now, I really think that the data that we have today, even if we do the best secondary analysis, and whatever we will do, is not good enough. We don't know enough about our children. And the only way to know enough about children is to do a new survey. And I'll tell you the story about that in the Canadian Bureau of Statistics in a moment, but there's another question.
So let's think a few steps down the road, a few years, a few decades perhaps. I usually have quite a loud voice.
Okay.
So you develop an index and you've decided the different weights, whatever it is, equal and stuff like that. And one of the things that is very clear here is that you want to influence policy. So you come up with an index, and all of a sudden I'm arguing between 85 versus 86. How do we avoid things like that? And say, well, if you're at the composite index of 85, if you come up with a number like 85, then these services will be provided. But if you are at 86, these services will not be provided. How can we avoid? Can it be avoided?
Well, first of all, I'm not such a big supporter of an index. But I'm not trying to escape it, because the same question will be for any indicator. If you are monitoring children's well-being in any aspect for a long time, what's the threshold that the government needs to intervene? Government, society, community, or whatever. My inclination toward this question would be, first of all, let's collect the data, and then the interpretation would be society, culture, budget, whatever, contingent. And the other thing is probably that the threshold will move. But probably the best example is the relevant poverty line. The relevant poverty line is firstly attacked by right-wing and many other people as irrelevant because it changes all the time. You could earn twice as much you earned 5 years ago and still be poor. But that's true. But the relevant poverty line from the beginning is not intended to measure poverty as a substance poverty, but how much do you have in comparison to most of society. So it's an economical gap measure. So if you say that as a society your goal is that the economic gaps would be limited, then you would say the threshold will go up, and still the relevant poverty line would be an applicable indicator forever. In Finland,